Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a puzzling question that I am going to seek to answer or hypothesize about. The question is this: has the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra become one of the dullest major ensembles before the public today, at least on disc? Now, let's be clear, because all of these orchestras have seasons with lots of conductors and they play lots of music, and what they record is only a teeny tiny sample of what they do. And so I can only talk about what I hear on recordings. But what I hear on recordings has me feeling very, very troubled. Now, recently, I just reviewed this thing, the new Brahms Third and Fourth with Herbert Blomstedt with the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra, which was exceptionally dull. And most of those who heard it, most of you who bothered to comment, having heard it, agreed that it was extraordinarily dull. More to the point, you also pointed out, absolutely correctly, that Blomstedt already did a Brahms Fourth. In fact, I'm wondering if I have it sitting here. See, here's the Blomstedt box, that strange little Decca thing. I'm just curious to see what's in here. Brahms, no. Brahms, no. Brahms. Well, okay, so the fourth isn't in here, but it doesn't matter, because as you pointed out, that fourth, which was on Decca, was amazingly more interesting than this remake on pentatone. I mean, there was really no reason to do a remake because they already had the fourth. For some reason, they never did a cycle when Blomstedt maybe was a little bit hotter. But the question is it partly the orchestra as well? I mean, it's a really serious question, because you have to ask yourself, how interesting for an orchestra of this pedigree in this repertoire can it be to do it over and 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 over? I mean, get it? It's got to be lethal, even if you have a very good conductor. I think most of the time you don't have a very good conductor. They're just saying, okay, do Brahms, and they do their Brahms. And it's like, I mean, let's look at some other bits of evidence. So you have a great Brahms for then, and you have a snoozeroonie Brahms for now under the same conductor. Now, granted, he's 95 years old, and maybe his persona has changed since, a decade and a half ago, or whenever that Brahms fourth was. But let's take another example. The conductor who they had after Blomstedt, he's their conductor emeritus. And after that, they had Ricardo Chailly, and now they have Andres Nelsons. So we can sort of follow them through several conductors. So Chailly did this really wonderful Beethoven cycle with the Gewandhaus. And when he did it, he had, first of all, this is one of those Beethoven cycles where it matters. That is, it mattered to the people doing it. And you can always tell when the conviction is there. First of all, Chailly had not done a previous Beethoven cycle. He waited, which I always think is smart when you're doing this sort of thing. Second of all, and perhaps even more importantly, he had adopted a quasi-period instrument kind of approach to doing Beethoven, as did Blomstedt, by the way, in his Beethoven cycle remake with the Leipzig Gewandhaus, which is also excellent, and this is excellent. So that's wonderful. But then later on, Chailly also did a Brahms cycle, also adopting a quasi-periody approach, at least a new, fresh look at the music. Quicker, snappier, and it's boring. Oh, it's so boring. Ah, boring, dull, boring. You want to kill yourself. Boring. Even though it does the same basic things that the Beethoven cycle did. So, is it the conductor's fault that it's boring? Well, yeah, ultimately everything's the conductor's fault. But is the orchestra already bored of playing with that approach? Is that the thing? Or take Blomstedt's other stuff with that orchestra. You may recall before Decca completely collapsed and basically dropped him and wrote him off. He did a really good Bruckner 9, and he did some fabulous Hindemith. He did with them the Sinfonia Serena and the Symphony Harmonie der Welt. The Harmonia der Welt, fabulous performances, really the reference recordings in that music. And oh, how I wish they had continued making Hindemith recordings. I wanted to hear them do the symphony in E-flat. Oh, yes, I wanted to hear them do the symphonic dances. They could have done so much wonderful stuff, but they didn't. It ended here. So that was that. Then Blomstedt did Bruckner. Yeah, that kind of Bruckner. A whole cycle. Here it is. Here it is, the whole sucker. Very expensive when it was released, and you got the whole kit and caboodle, and it was just such a bore. It is a bore. It's totally boring. I mean, a couple early ones are nice. I know some of you have heard it, and you'll say, oh, I like that. But on the whole, compared to all of the other stuff that's out there that we can compare it to, it is absolutely brain dead, comatose. Now, part of that, of course, is Blomstedt's fault. Blomstedt is not, in my experience, a particularly compelling Bruckner conductor. He really isn't. I don't quite understand why, but he's such a plain Jane, as I sort of said it before, a plain Jane Brucknerite. He just lets the music go, and he doesn't invest it with any particularly compelling point of view or interpretive thrust. And so as often as not, I mean, his sixth in San Francisco wasn't bad. The fourth wasn't terrible in San Francisco. The earlier recordings of 4 and 7 on Denon, they were pretty dull. And this box is just awful. So again, some of it may be the conductor, but Blomstedt's a pretty damn fine conductor. Let's not kid ourselves. And he loves the orchestra, and supposedly they love him. So who's doing what? Whose responsibility is it that the result is so completely faceless? It really is. And then adding insult to injury, we have Andres Nelson's doing another Bruckner cycle, and it's the worst of all. It's on Deutsche Grammophon. It's abysmal in every possible way that you can imagine. Happily, Victor Carr at classicstoday.com reviewed the last one. I was begging him. I didn't want to have to do it. I mean, I've been getting rid of them as quickly as they come in. And, and I'm paying for these things, mind you. And they're just horrible. They're absolutely, completely, atrociously dreary, droopy. There are no climaxes. Everything is congealed and it's just awful. And I cannot believe that an orchestra of this caliber doesn't know that, doesn't know what they're doing. And I am rather, I have to ask myself, let's put it this way. I have to ask myself, if they had the opportunity to do some really interesting repertoire, let's say they did a Nielsen cycle under Blomstedt or something else, I cannot imagine that the result would be as uninteresting as it has become when they do the standard German repertoire. I'm stunned by how droopy they've gotten. Now, I don't think, frankly, having the opportunity to do a Bruckner cycle under Andres Nelson's is something that would get my pulse racing. I really, really don't. But when you look at what they perform during the season, I mean, Ingo Metzmacher is doing a concert with them. It's got Karl Amadeus Hartmann's Gesangsszene or whatever that thing is, or his or the First Symphony or one of those things, one of those Hartmann things that Metzmacher does. And then in the second half, they're doing Shostakovich Fourth. I mean, there's so many things that this great orchestra could do that I would be positively fascinated to hear them do. But you've got these record labels saying to them, okay, you've got to do Brahms, you've got to do Beethoven, you've got to do Bruckner. Okay, guys, calm down. Seriously, if I were playing in that orchestra, I would be ready to slit my wrists. And I understand there is a level of professionalism that they're expected to deliver, and they do. They never deliver less than totally professional, superior results. They do, technically. Technically, that's true. But it doesn't seem to matter anymore who the conductor is. Granted, Andras Nelson's is no Blomstedt. And Shaib and Blomstedt are as different as can be, which is very interesting, actually, because the results have become equally dull, no matter who the conductor is. And when that happens, and when at least one or arguably two of the conductors are really, really top-notch guys, well, then you have to ask yourself, maybe the problem is the orchestra, or maybe the problem is the repertoire that the orchestra is being asked to record over and over and over and over. I mean, like I said, if I were playing in the Gewandhaus, I would be bored, and I would also be a little insulted, because they know what they can do. They know how good they are. And there's a limit to how many Gewandhaus Brahms cycles the world wants, or how many Gewandhaus Bruckner cycles, whether it's Bruckner or Bruckner. Yeah, okay. Seriously, how many of those do you want? I mean, there's got to be a limit. And they have to be saying to themselves, okay, we're getting paid, we're going to show up, we're going to play. But in their hearts, I believe they are saying, oh no, not again. Please, can we please do something else? I mean, they haven't even done Mendelssohn. I mean, they're not even getting the chance to do Mendelssohn, and they're the hometown Mendelssohn team. Yes, with Shaid they did some Bach, and beautiful Bach at that. But that's, a teeny little snippet of the full ensemble. Wouldn't it be nice to hear the full ensemble, like all of them? Like in the Shostakovich Fourth, for example? Anyway, I just had to mention that because I'm really puzzled and more than a little bit concerned about what is going on with this band. It may be that, in their live concerts, they're thrilling. I don't know. I'm not there. I know there's a lot on YouTube and other places you can see some stuff and you can decide for yourself. But this constant remaking of the standard German repertoire is not doing them a service. And they are not doing the repertoire justice. That I know. And so I just wanted to speculate about the reasons for this phenomenon that seems to have overtaken this illustrious, august group of people. Perhaps someone has the answer and can clarify it. I sure can't. All I know is that it's boring, unbelievably boring. And, they've got to be able to do better. I don't know what recordings particularly are coming. I believe Blomstedt's doing Schubert and Berwald, and maybe just Berwald and not Schubert. I don't know. So we'll have to see how that comes out as well. At least some of that, maybe the Berwald, will be unbelievably more interesting than what we've heard thus far recently. And if it is, then we may have something of an answer. I'm awfully curious to find out, and I'll keep you posted. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.